All right. Happy Tuesday. It still feels like Friday, but we have a short week in Germany, so that's the good news. Welcome to another episode of PKs on Air. Today we are going to be talking about something that I have no clue about. That's always a great start, right? We're going to talk about paid search actually. And for that, I brought some people that are much smarter and way more familiar with the topic than I am. Domi, sorry that doesn't go to your direction. Even though I'm very glad that you're going to join me again. That's fantastic. But no pressure on the paid search part. I think we both should kind of stick to what we probably can do, right?
Right. So the creative part is fine, but when it comes to copy, then
yeah, exactly. And then we also have our very own Charlie joining us. Charlie, hi, how are you?
Hi, Bastian. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Glad that you could make some time for us, so that we always try to kind of have a bit of a broader view on things, and like trying to mix in organic with. I mean, we had people from other teams, of course, in the last episodes as well. So like we're trying to do a bit of social. We talked a bit about tracking just recently, some of the changes that are going to happen or that actually happened, and I saw some numbers that are really interesting. So I think we kind of talked about this iOS tracking implications and them requiring the opt-in. And I think the latest numbers that I saw were like 4%. So I think interesting times for us as marketers. So and therefore, of course, we're also always kind of keen to look into different things and kind of give a bit of a broader view, as I said. So I think it's very cool that you could squeeze us in for a bit of paid search today. So I think that's gonna be good. But before we get going, give us a quick rundown on who you are. I mean, you recently joined, so half fresh, not entirely anymore. I mean, it's already May, right? So you started beginning of the year. But what do we need to know about you? Give us a 30 seconds version.
Okay, yes. So as you said, I joined Peak Ace back in February this year after working in the paid media team of a UK-based agency. So I've been working in paid media for about 3 years now, but I've got a particular interest in the creative side of paid media, I would say, which is why we're going to be talking about ad copy today. So this is a talk I delivered about a month ago, actually, at a event called SMX Create, which was exactly that, the creative side of PPC, a brand new event organized by Search Marketing Expo. So really happy to share the insights with.
Yeah, that's gonna be really cool. I mean, we kind of do. Dominique did, and kind of I did a couple of talks back in the days as well. But as you said, like the Create format is a new one, right? So so before we get going, like what was your I mean, obviously, things being virtual and all, but so I always have a bit of a hard time, and I think we had like a couple of episodes where we talked about events, right, Dominique? But like, and we kind of agreed that experience is maybe a bit of a hard word. I mean, it is an experience in a way, right? But like, I think it's very much different from having kind of in-person events, right? So what was your kind of experience with the event? I mean, like the guys at SMX, I mean, they're pros, like the organization and stuff like that usually works really well, but like specifically on the Create part. So what's different?
So like I said, it was really focusing on the creative side. So it was like brand new kind of topics. So they covered quite broad topics actually. So they had a session on like display creative as well, which I think is not something you see too much at conferences talking about display creative. So I think it was definitely a bit different, bit of a different angle, because I think PPC paid media talks have a bit of a tendency, especially recently, to focus on like the attribution and all these changes and automation. They're really big themes and they're super important, but if you're interested in other elements, this was a really nice event.
Cool. And was it a 2-day event, or was it 1 day? How did it work?
It was a couple of days overall, but the kind of PPC day was just one day.
Right. And then was it only PPC, or was it like other creative topics as well?
Yeah, there was a content track running simultaneously as well.
Right. Okay. And then I suppose, because I haven't seen it in Europe, it was the US edition, right?
Yes.
I mean, obviously virtual, but it was kind of focused towards the States.
Yeah. I was going to say it's hosted in Washington, but
yeah. Okay. Nice, interesting. And so I mean, you've done kind of a bit of like talks in the I think when we kind of spoke earlier the year, like you said, you had done a couple of talks already. It's like, how's your general take on like kind of, I mean, of course there's a necessity to have virtual events, but like in general, what's your take? Is it like do you like it better? Is it harder for you as like a presenter, or like what's your personal kind of preference or take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mixed. I mean, it's easier in the sense that you're just, in your lounge, it's all relaxed. But then in other ways, it's harder because you're getting no feedback from the audience like you would with a real event. And you can, you have your questions, which are a bit more dynamic. You can, change your pace, change what you're saying slightly based on the audience you've got there. Whereas with virtual, you've got no feedback. So it's harder in some ways too. Yeah.
Yeah, usually my stupid jokes don't work either. This is really annoying. Like, which is just like it's just a very kind of, how do you say it? Like, it's just one direction and like no feedback channel whatsoever. So Dominique, I mean, you did a couple of the virtual talks in the last month as well. So like, what's your thoughts on it?
Pretty much matches with Charlie's impression, I would say. So I'm also like, so my most important thing, I think, when talking at conferences is always like getting feedback and getting in touch with new people, and like the networking part in general is super important for me. Not just showing my expertise, but also like getting in touch with people. And this is the part I'm missing the most. So, and I think also, as you mentioned, like your jokes are not working on virtual conferences. This is exactly with also some other topics when talking like to an audience where you don't see like any kind of face expressions. It's pretty hard to react accordingly, right? So I think sometimes when you're on a live stage and you see like people like wondering or taking some screenshots or images from your slides, okay, maybe that's something I should like leave some more sentences about or explain a bit further. And this is a bit harder, I guess. But on the other way around, I found it quite interesting to see when I did the first like entire virtual event. I was a bit nervous because the last conference were like months ago, and then I was like, okay, I haven't done like a conference talk since months, and then it started, and I wasn't that nervous anymore because I couldn't see like the audience, right? So I think for people who just start to have like something like conference talks, it's a bit easier. Because
it's funny that you say that. That would have been my next question to both of you actually. Like, would you say you're like more nervous, or are you kind of less nervous on a virtual, on a virtual stage?
Yeah. So from my point, it's definitely less nervous, but I'm also missing the feeling you have after the conference.
It's not as fulfilling.
Exactly. So this is what I like also the most after being on stage. Like before, it's like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I just want to run away. But afterwards, the feeling is like amazing. When you're happy, of course, with your conference talk. So I'm definitely less nervous, but also missing the feeling afterwards. Yeah. How about you, Charlie?
Yeah, I can agree with you. I think it's like just you don't have that energy and that kind of adrenaline, I suppose, before like walking on stage. But
very true.
It's good for first-time speakers for sure. If you want to dip the toe in the water, it's a nice way to do it.
Yeah, it's true, because it just literally feels like you just, it doesn't feel very much different from a regular kind of day-to-day thing with a bit more tech maybe involved, but like overall it's kind of more or less the same, right? Yeah. Interesting. So I agree. I don't know, like the virtual stuff is just really like, so we shall see. But like speaking of SMX, actually there's a new thing that we're trying with SMX Advanced, actually. So SMX Advanced Europe is up in June, so not that much longer, actually. Like I think 5 weeks or so. Around the 20th, if I'm not totally mistaken. I don't have it in my head, but like, so what they're trying is kind of a hybrid event in a way that so that's going to be different hubs, basically. So when you as an attendee are going to register, you can say, look, I just want to dial in virtually, which is of course totally fine. But we could also you could say like, look, I'm in Berlin anyway, so I want to kind of attend from the Berlin hub, and the Berlin hub is then our office. And then there's like a bunch of other locations. I think it's 10 or so, if I'm not totally wrong, like in the bigger cities around Europe. And then there's going to be like a half in-person experience, I suppose, and then that's going to be all streamed into one big thing. So I'm kind of curious how that goes, actually.
Yeah.
But what I at least like is that something new. It's not always the same. So this is actually, this is why I was like, yeah, let's give it a try. There's going to be some nice other kind of locations. So our friends from Write in Munich are going to be hosting like the Munich one, and there's a bunch of others throughout Germany. But there's also like I think Bluegrass does like Raphael. We had him in one of the very early shows at kind of PKs on there. So Bluegrass is I think hosting Zurich, and then so it's a bunch of others. I'm kind of curious how that goes. Also with like
interesting
dialing it all together and kind of getting it sorted out. So I'm curious, but I think it's actually cool because it's not always the same. Because I mean, usually either you have like the full virtual, or you kind of going back to somewhat in person at some point. But I think as we've been saying in some of the previous kind of shows, I mean, there's a bit of pros and cons to both of it. I mean, kind of Charlie mentioned it correctly. I would say from the speaker's perspective, I think also you could argue for some that like it's just like taking less time off the calendar, is limited travel. Others would say like I'm kind of missing like the in-person perspective, which I would agree. But I mean, each to their own, right? So I think there is a future potentially for like at least kind of semi-hybrid. I don't know, or at least how you kind of interconnect different ways of attending. I think that's probably more the way to phrase it. So I'm kind of curious how that goes. But I also saw, I think we mentioned like probably 2 weeks ago, that Brighton goes back to the like full event, if I'm not wrong, I think it's the September one, isn't it?
July already. They're hoping for
July. I thought it's September actually. Okay, I might have mixed it up, but yeah. Maybe. So I'm kind of curious how that plays out. So well, I hope for the best, but yeah. So let's see. That's I think one of the big things in Brighton. Like it is an in-person event ultimately. Yeah. So
it's a lot of fun.
kind of missing the pier there. So that's for sure. Yeah. So let's see how it goes. Are you potentially going, Charlie, or
to the September one, maybe.
September.
TBC.
Yeah. TBC. I see. I see. Very good. All right. So enough about generic conference stuff. Let's kind of get into back to some of the paid search topics. I'm like very curious on, like you said, like I mean, you've seen like a bunch of talks in the past on like the more regular, I would say PPC topics, on PPC automation, as you said. Like I think it's a huge topic. Also a huge topic at PKs, obviously, because like especially when the accounts get very large, there's a lot of like automation and scaling and kind of data-driven approaches being needed. So I think it's not one or the other, but I think also fundamentally, oftentimes, I think the creative part is a bit missing. So kind of curious. Kind of on your take, just for those that recently dialed in, before we get going, we're gonna be, of course, putting the recording live. There's also like a write-up that Charlie actually did, so we're gonna link that afterwards as well, kind of based on the talk. So if you kind of want to follow up afterwards, or just follow along and see what kind of the key takeaways are and how that could potentially help you. Then we also have a full like English write-up that we're going to link from the recap. So that's there. Feel free to kind of pop in your questions into the chat. Wherever you're watching from. I know there's people, like I just saw Ben saying hello from YouTube. So like wherever you kind of dialed in from, doesn't really matter. Just like we try to kind of watch the comments on the platforms, so we can either ask in between, or you can also of course reach us afterwards. Just either connect with Domi, I, or Charlie on Twitter, and it's like whatever works for you. I'm happy to kind of also answer the questions afterwards. All right, so without further ado, let me try to get this screen share thing working here. I think this looks actually already quite good. Yeah, so Charlie, stage, at least the virtual one in this case, is all yours when you're ready.
Awesome, thank you. So as we mentioned, we're going to be talking about ad copywriting today from an ad copywriter's perspective. That's me. So what you should take away from this session is some tips on punching up your ad copy to get the attention of your target audience, some tips on compelling that target audience to take a specific action, and also how to deliver a consistent experience from the ad to the landing page. So I've got 5 key areas that I'm going to cover throughout the course of this talk. So first of all, we're going to talk about considering the user journey. Secondly, about how you can capture the voice of your customer. Then about how you can take inspiration from your competition. Finally, how important it is to keep current and keep up with the times with your ad copy. And then how you can leverage dynamic ad features in some more creative ways to the standard ways as well. So let's kick off with considering the user journey. It's really important that you tailor your ad copy and your landing pages to the stages of the user journey. Many of you are probably familiar with this visualization of the conversion funnel, which is a visualization of how a user has interacted with your brand, business, product or service to date, right through from being completely unaware that you exist through to being aware of the exact products, brands that you carry at the bottom where they're most aware. And it's quite likely in a paid search account that your campaign and ad group structure aligns with this in some way. So you might have some broader generic keywords, which will match up with the kind of top of the funnel stages, and then some really kind of specific longer tail brand, size, color, product keywords towards the bottom. And it's important that you tailor the ad copy and landing pages in line with these keywords as well. And something I see quite often in paid search accounts is that even though these different keywords will be targeted, the copywriters will be talking about their product or service in the exact same way across the different campaigns. And I think it's super important to talk about your product or service differently depending on what kind of user you're speaking to. So I'm going to walk through an example. So this is an example of a client I work with who sells air quality monitors. So I've mapped out a couple of the user journey stages here. So right at the problem aware stage, in this case, a user might search a query along the lines of mold growing in the house. So instead of just going in with kind of hard sales messaging at this point, you might want to speak to their query in a slightly different way with a headline like worried about mold indoors. And at that point as well, using a kind of less aggressive call to action. So something like learn more or find out how we can help. And then linking to an appropriate landing page for that kind of intent as well. So maybe that's an informational page or a product category page in this case. And then at the next stage, you've got the slightly more specific query. So we'd call this a solution aware kind of stage. So they know that there is a solution for their problem, which in this case is an air quality monitor. So you can reflect that kind of intent in the headline. And then at that point, I would suggest you start to be a little bit more aggressive with your call to action. So you can start encouraging them to compare different products or look at your range in this case, because this client has multiple air quality monitors. Then you've got the product aware stage where they're really aware of your brand and the air quality monitor that you sell. So again, reflect that in your headline, and you can start to really encourage people towards that point of purchase when they're really aware of what they're looking for at this point. And then similarly to that, you've got your most aware stage where people might search for the exact brand and the exact product. They really know what they're looking for. So then you can just be straight up salesy at that point, and that is appropriate for that kind of query.
I would maybe also already have a question in terms of like being not. So you mentioned it's super important to be like in a problem aware stage, to be not that aggressive already in terms of like ad copy. But in a situation like when the person is like searching for like mold growing in house, why do you think it makes sense to give like further information about that kind of topic instead of trying to sell already the product? Is that something you would test within the campaign or within your strategy, or is it just something like you know that it makes more sense to go a bit more like informational content or informational targeting here about the problem itself and not focusing on the product?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, like you've said, it would definitely make sense to test it if that's something you wanted to try. And it also depends on, you know, the client strategy. Like some clients or businesses may not want to spend money sending traffic to an informational page, which is totally reasonable depending on budget. But I think the kind of level of intent that the user is at this point, if they've just discovered this problem in their house, they're just looking for a way to fix it, but they're not necessarily ready to make a $400 purchase at that moment from a company that they've never heard of before, most likely, if they're putting in a query like this. So if you are using these kind of terms, it's important to not only measure the performance of those kind of terms and the conversion rates of the informational and category pages, but also the knock-on impact that advertising on these kind of terms would have on lower funnel page search keywords as well, ultimately over a longer period of time, and also potentially an uplift across other channels as well as a result of doing this kind of strategy.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. I think it also really much depends on the search query itself, right? So how complex the topic really is. So how much content, or where is the potential client, and how much guidance does the person potentially need before like being able to take a decision on or bias decision or something like this. Yeah, great. Exactly. Okay, interesting.
Cool. So I'll move on to talking about how you can try and capture the voice of your customer within your ad copy. So my advice here would be to test different psychological approaches. So ad copy should be able to highlight how your product or service can offer a solution to the user's problem, like the one we've just discussed, the mold growing in the house, or how it will make the user's life easier or more enjoyable. So that's focusing really on the benefit it will bring to the user. So not falling into a bit of a trap of just describing features, which are like attributes or characteristics of a product or service, but really focusing on the benefit, which is how it helps the customer. And tying into that as well, reviews and social proof and evidencing how your product or service has helped others are really good for this as well. And yeah, you can see in this example, this ad is really kind of just offering a solution. So the query here is if someone's feeling down, they just really directly show how they're offering a solution to that problem. So how can you find out what your customers do want to see from their ads? There's a couple of ways of doing this. A top tip would be to speak to your or your client's customer service team and ask about the kind of questions, problems, and complaints that they get from customers. And then you can really understand the pain points and also the things they love about the product or service. And then start to incorporate those kind of things into your copy. Can also look at search query data while we still have the majority of it, and look at high impression, low click-through rate terms in particular, because this will show you where there is a lot of intent and a lot of demand. But if you've got a low click-through rate there, then that's suggesting that your ad's not really very well tailored to that kind of intent at the moment. So if it is a relevant term, then you might want to look at how you can adjust your ad copy to cater to that intent a little better, or of course, if it's irrelevant, exclude it. And finally, you can also analyze customer reviews. You can do this just manually by eye if you don't have too many products or too many reviews. But if you have tons of products, tons of reviews, I do have a bit of a kind of data-driven method which you can take to analyze those reviews. If you can do a text export, you can export the reviews as a text file and then run that through like a text analyzer tool, which is free online, and that will kind of spit out the most commonly used words and phrases for you. And then you can start to incorporate those into your ad copy as well.
Charlie, maybe one question, because you were talking about like testing or text analyzing tools. Do you have any like personal recommendations in terms of that? So something you would recommend in order to like analyze all those like massive text blocks you would receive while uploading or downloading all of the reviews?
I've just used some free ones from Google in the past, but I think there's some paid tools like SEMrush that you can do it with as well.
Yeah. Great, interesting. It's a very interesting approach, I think, in general. So working with like customer reviews, because I mean, that would potentially would be also super interesting in terms of content marketing, of course. So I'm coming from that perspective, of course. So super interesting approach here, definitely, because what you mentioned in terms of like talking to clients, customer service team is always super relevant, I guess, in order to get like very deep feedback and know what kind of problems does the client or potential client has. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting approach. Great.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's a really cool one. I've done this for a client in the past, which sold fitness equipment, and we found some really interesting language when we were doing that, completely different to the kinds of things we were previously talking about in ads. So yeah, previously we were talking about like the steel grade and like the weight ranges and things like that. And when we looked at the reviews, we noticed that wasn't really what the customers cared about, or they just cared that it was like a good price point and that it was sturdy. So it completely changed our messaging approach doing this. So something that's super helpful for, of course, testing these different copy combinations and these different psychological approaches is responsive search ads, which are now the default ad type on Google. So we expect to see the Google ads will be putting increasing amounts of emphasis on responsive search ads in the coming months. So these are really handy to incorporate those different kind of ad copy psychological approaches into, and your top impression search queries as well. At the moment, performance reporting on these is a little bit limited, but you can infer what the top performing assets and combinations are based on the impression data. So that's the only metric you can see for RSAs at the moment. But if it's been shown massively more, like in this example, when ad combination's been shown 71% of the time, is probably a good indicator that messaging is doing quite well. And you can use that RSA performance to build out new expanded text ads, and also vice versa. You can use your expanded text ads to build out new RSAs as well. So they can work together really nicely, and that can save you some time to automate some elements of that across the different ad types. So talking about sizing up the competition now. So I think it's obviously a really good idea to always keep an eye on what your competitors in the market are doing. You can find your kind of Google paid search competitors really easily by just doing a few quick Google searches, or you can use a paid tool to do this, but you don't need to have one. And it's good to take a look at what the competitors are doing, but rather than copying it, making sure that you're differentiating yourself from what the competitors are doing. And it's another top tip of mine to follow not only your client, but also their top competitors on social media platforms, because that really allows you to keep an eye on what's going on in the industry and just keep your finger on the pulse without actively trying to search for it. It just kind of feeds into your LinkedIn and your Instagram news feed. When you're following the kind of brands, it ruins your Instagram algorithm, but it's helpful. And also to sign up to your competitor and clients' email newsletters as well. It's a really good way to stay in the loop and also get inspiration for copy messaging as well, because the email copywriter and the ad copywriter are probably quite often not the same person. So it's good to help you stay in line with a consistent tone of voice across all digital channels in that way too. It can also help you to capitalize on reactive opportunities if you're really keeping an eye on your competitors in this way. So I've got an example of how that happened recently. So here in the UK, a really big high street retailer called Topshop closed down, and they moved online to ASOS, which is a a big fashion e-commerce website. And this was really big news. There was one of these stores in every single high street in the UK. So it made massive news. And there was a huge spike in branded search volume for Topshop at the time. And so one of ASOS and Topshop's competitors capitalized on this launch by bidding on Topshop's brand name with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of ad saying, "This is awkward, we'd never leave you," because Topshop's website pretty much disappeared overnight. So they really managed to jump in and be reactive there because they were keeping an eye on the market and what their competitors were doing. And just a further note on that one, if you are going to go with a bold ad copy strategy, make sure that matches the kind of tone of your brand and the landing page, because it would be a bit jarring to have this kind of fun, cheeky ad and then leading to like a really boring landing page. So for Pretty Little Thing, this totally fits. They're a really kind of fun, youthful brand. Like you can see on their landing page, they talk about like day drinking and like partying on June the 21st, where they're supposedly lifting lockdown restrictions in the UK. So it works, but just be mindful of strategies like that, depending on the kind of brands you're working with. Okay, and this section I'm talking about how important it is to keep up with the times. So reviewing and updating your ad messaging regularly should go without saying, but it's never been more important than it is at the moment. So I saw this ad a couple of weeks ago when we were in the midst of lockdown, when it's still having a call to action to go visit in the store, which was completely inappropriate at the time. So just make sure that you're regularly scheduling time to review and update your ads. And you might be able to automate elements of this process, for example, by using ad customizers to switch out your call to action, or even having one set of ads, which is kind of tailored towards in-store messaging, and one set of ads which are more e-commerce focused, and you can interchange those depending on current restrictions, as we've needed to do throughout the past year.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a really interesting one. I think this goes back to one of the very early episodes that Dominique and I had, where we kind of also talked about like changed brand messaging, not only, but like generally, change of messaging throughout campaigning, throughout, whatever you roll out. And you're totally right with what you're saying here in the way of like, sometimes it might not be okay, but sometimes it's even like really inappropriate. And like if you kind of tell someone to go to something, I mean, that's just also burning money, right? That call to action is not going to lead you to do anything useful at all, right? So I think like it's a lot of different things here, right? It's not only like you might kind of, wouldn't go as far as like maybe not in this case, but like you might even like do more harm than you do good with certain like not updated messages. And I think that's true for all channels, not only paid search. So that can be kind of applicable for a lot of whatever ad copy or ads, or campaigns you're essentially running. I think as you said, like it's a bit sad actually to see that this is still happening when this is going for like, I don't know, like 1.5 years now, right?
Yeah, you still see a surprising amount of ads which do it. Is quite surprising. Yeah.
So yeah, really good pointer here. True.
Yeah, and I mean, to go one step further than that, there's plenty of brands which have adapted to this well and have even gone one step further to be really hyper relevant and current in their ad copy messaging. So, for example, Apple, who are always on it with really cool marketing, I think this line that they've included in one of their search ads is really clever. So they're saying, everything you love about our stores is online. And I think that one really speaks to like a demographic who may have not been so into online shopping in the past and may be more comfortable visiting the store, but obviously they can't at the moment. So that kind of really reassures demographics that they're still going to be able to get what they want and the experience that they love when they're shopping online. So really like that example. And yeah, there's a couple of others here. So, like loungewear is the ultimate work from home wardrobe and about lounging in lockdown. divorce lawyers offering video conference appointments, which would have been super strange 18
That's a good one.
ago.
I like that, actually.
Yeah. So yeah, some places have done it really well. Like these examples here, and holidays really focusing on like insurance and protection and cancellation and that kind of thing, which is probably not the first thing you would think about when booking a holiday before. And going to talk about leveraging dynamic ad features finally. So you might have heard of ad customizers, which you can use to create highly specific ad copy. They enable you to adapt your text ads to what someone is searching for, how they're searching, or where they're searching from. So these are probably some of the most common use cases. So you can change your messaging based on the keyword that has triggered the ad, based on the location that the user is in. So like this top example here, the location could be set up with an ad customizer, so it will change based on where the user is. Or you can use it to insert any type of text across a campaign or ad group at bulk. So this is a really scalable solution, as you just need to update what is essentially a data feed, and that will automatically update your ads. So it's a lot quicker than kind of manually updating the ads, and it doesn't reset your ad reporting either, which is really useful if you're making a lot of changes, for example, to offers, or come up with some other examples here. So maybe you want to keep prices and sale prices up to date in bulk, like the example here was cover from 220, or show the quantity of inventory you have left. This one's been quite important for industries which have done really well out of the pandemic and have potentially had really low stock. Like going back to my fitness equipment client that I worked with, for example, they were really low on stock all year. So they wanted to, show where they barely had any stock left, using as customizers to really drive urgency. Can also use it to highlight how many happy customers you have to date, because research shows that people tend to trust exact numbers more. So instead of just saying trusted by over 1 million stores, you can really be a bit more specific with the amount of customers that you have. In this example here, we're going to test this out for one of our lead gen clients as well, with kind of updating the number of customers they have on board each month. And another fun one I thought of was that you could also tempt people to go on holiday again by updating the kind of current temperature at the holiday destination in your feed, and then that would automatically update all your ads which were related to like Tenerife, for example, with the right temperature that day. So that could be quite a fun and creative one.
Great. Charlie, just a second. So my connection was a bit laggy, so maybe I've missed that. But I would have a question in terms of like keeping all those data like up to date currently. Mm-hmm. So in terms of like, I don't know, pricing and also like inventory, maybe you can give us just a few sentences about like how to keep that like up to date and like workflows behind that.
Yes. So essentially, if you're managing something like pricing, you would just have similar to a shopping feed, you would just have a big feed of the product and the price, and then they would have the appropriate headings of those columns to pull it into an ad customizer, and you would upload that feed into your Google Ads business data. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be feasible for all clients. I mean, it depends on the time and the resource you have, and also the size of your inventory and how fast moving your stock is. There's a number of factors, but all you would need to do would be to change one number in that feed, whether that be the price or the amount of inventory you have left on any given day, and that would pull across all the ads that you've coded to pull in the customizer data.
Okay.
And yes, so hopefully we've covered some ways to punch up your ad copy by using the language of your customers and really speaking to where they are in the user journey, and how to write copy that compels them to take a specific action. So again, using an appropriate call to action based on where they are in the user journey as well, or driving urgency with inventory levels in ad customizers, and also delivering a consistent experience from ad to landing page. So again, thinking about the user journey and what kind of landing page would be appropriate, and also thinking about the kind of tone you're using in your ads versus the tone that's being used on the landing page and even other channels like email, social, etc.
Really cool. That was a lot of stuff in there. Actually, one thing that kind of I think stood out is I'm just gonna push one comment here because it kind of goes in the same direction. So Ben was saying the same. I think people enjoy like the idea of the text analyzer example. That's quite cool. So yeah, Ben said like, look, the idea of the text analyzer is really great. So maybe we can just kind of summarize that like one more time. So what you're saying there is like essentially you need one kind of structured form of like review data, right? If I understood it correctly. So in a sheet and however that output looks like, and then you would kind of run any type of text analyzing tool against it, and then kind of would get I don't know, USPs or like generally tonality or whatever out of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you should be able to pull like a CSV file, for example. Like I know Trustpilot lets you pull all that data that, or you can scrape the website. And then you run that through the tool, and it should spit out the most common words, phrases in that, and you can.
Yeah, that's actually quite smart idea. Dominique is already kind of putting notes.
I'm super excited.
But this is the funny part of a company of our size these days. Like, there's even things that kind of we don't share, which is quite funny. It's always quite helpful. Anyhow, I kind of meanwhile, for those that are kind of following or want to kind of follow along, I put together like a quick short link. So the kind of key takeaways from Charlie's talk are also in the PK's blog. So the short link is here if you kind of want to have a look afterwards. Again, we're going to link it also from the show notes or the recap, either way. So you can kind of have a look, and then I'm sure there are questions. And if you have questions, you can just bother Charlie, and we'd be happy to answer them. I mean, no, seriously, like as always, like we're there to help. So if you have questions, just kind of get in touch. Sure, we're gonna find a way to help you out with that. But yeah, Charlie, thank you very, very much. I think that was really cool. Some really good ideas there, and like also I think it's quite funny, kind of as you said, like there's so many changes, and I think you mentioned it like on one or two slides. Like it can't be a static process, right? It always has to be something that you kind of need to revisit and kind of update and change over. Absolutely. So for those of you that kind of run paid search campaigns, I think it's worthwhile going back, having a look and see what you can kind of squeeze in. And I think, go on.
Yeah, I would maybe have one question. One last
question.
Then
let's do one more question. I think we're kind of good on time for today.
I have a list. I have still a list, but we can have a chat afterwards. But maybe one because personally we're also already talking about like testing. And Charlie, I would be super interested in having your opinion about the testing perspective. So when you test like creative ad copy, so is there something you would suggest in general? So how many copies you can test at the same time? So this is the first part of the question, I guess. And the second, how much data do you need to evaluate really like which copy I want to go with further? So how long should a test be? So how many tests how many copies I can test at the same time? Can you give us your opinion about that or your experience?
Yeah, of course. So regarding how many you can test at the same time, the best practice at PKs and kind of across the industry is about 4 to 6 ads per ad group. So ideally that would be 1 responsive search ad and then 3 to 5 expanded text ads. And that kind of depends on how much traffic you've got coming into your account. You might not want to do 5 expanded text ads if it's quite a low volume account. They're probably not all going to get that much traction. If it's quite a low impression account, if it's high impressions, why not? And it also depends on how many kind of messaging approaches you want to test. Like if you've just got kind of one product and you don't really have so many different approaches or offers that you're able to test, then you might want less. But if you've got like some offer messaging, you want to test some different approaches like we talked about, then it might make sense to have 5. I think another key point to mention there is just be careful about like how much you're changing and how carefully you're measuring that. Don't just run with like 6 completely different ads, and so you can't pinpoint like which elements are actually driving the performance. So try and have ads where you just change one element, so you can, if you're looking at 2 next to each other, you can really pinpoint the element that is resonating really well with people. And
otherwise it's too many variables, right? Like it's extremely hard to kind of take out, what of the 5 changes is. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I suppose regarding how long you need to wait, that's kind of an annoying, it depends answer, I suppose. It really depends on the volume of traffic you usually get to your account. If it's low volume, it will take a while, or you might need to make a decision with less data. High volume, it might become obvious like within a number of days, really. So it depends on that one.
Makes sense.
Okay, great.
All right, so guys, we need to wrap it up. We already again almost 45.
Close to 5.
Yeah, close to 5. So all good. Again, Charlie, thank you for taking the time. Much appreciate that. I think there was some really cool content in there. Absolutely. So for those that kind of are watching regularly, I think we're going to be having a break next week. So we were going to be back in actually 2 weeks' time with a bit of a kind of a surprise. So you shall see on socials what's going to happen there. But yeah, so no PKs on there next week. But the week after, again, same day, same time. So Tuesday, 4 p.m. German time. And with that, I just leave you with where you can find the show notes. We're going to be off for today. Thank you very much for dialing in, and see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.